Hello ladies and gentlemen. Today we are here to give you a presentation of the deformational history of Middle Earth. One presentation to rule them all. But in actuality we'll be talking about New Zealand and the Alpine Fault. I'm Zivkovic. Unfortunately today Skylor Steed couldn't be here. So if I seem to be glancing over a few of the slides as we go, it's because he knows more about them than I do, and I'll just be doing a quick overview since he's not here. So to start off, we'll talk about our structural problem. Why is there a transform fault instead of a subduction zone bisecting New Zealand? And why does it have such a high angle oblique component? To answer this question, we'll be going through these different parts of the presentation. We'll talk about the regional tectonic setting, our area of interest. We'll give a brief overview of some orogenic histories, starting with the Tuhua and the Rangitata orogenies. We'll talk a little bit about the enigma of the Tasman Sea. Talk about the Kaikoura orogeny, finish up with stresses on the Southern Alps and subduction to the south. So our tectonic setting, here we have New Zealand. We have the Pacific plate here on the right and the Australian plate here on the left. The Australian plate is moving northeast at around 62 to 70 millimeters per year, while the Pacific is moving northwest around 56 to 100 millimeters per year, with the Pacific plate subducting under the Australian about 40 millimeters per year. New Zealand, as you can see, is sitting right here in between two. Kind of go zoom in right here, the Pacific plate, Australian plate, coming and subducting over here. Here you can see the Alpine Fault bisecting the southern island of New Zealand. And then you can see that we have a trench and then transform and another trench boundary going on through this area. And you can see that the slip part of this fault is right lateral, going right along the southern Alps here. So, a quick general chronology of the orogenies. First, we have the Tuhua, which caused folding and layer parallel shortening of sediments off the coast of Gondwana. Igneous intrusions occurred as the result of coastal thickening and subduction. The second event that happened shortly after the Tuhua is the Rangitata, and it further deformed the folded beds of the Tuhua, making asymmetric folds as well as high-angle faults. These high-angle faults developed also in conjunction with the third mound-building event, the Kaikoura, but they are indicated by synforms and antiforms. And then finally, dome and basin structures develop localized faults. So to start off, we have future New Zealand over here, also known as Zealandia. And about 400 million years ago, it was part of Gondwana, consisting mostly of offshore sediments just being deposited off of Gondwana from the mountains. Eventually, the Pacific plate began to subduct westward beneath Gondwana, and it initiated the first recognizable orogeny, which is the Tuhua. So the first large-scale deformational event was the Tuhua, and you can see it represented over here in this picture with these folding beds of the sediment and the igneous intrusions. There might be as many as 4 deformational events, but we only have 2 that are pictured. Here you can see the directions in this figure of the deformation coming from the subduction of the Pacific plate. And you can see that the principal stress directions are from northwest to southeast, kind of along this pattern. There were some igneous intrusions happening at the time. They're granitic, and they help us establish the age of the deformations to around the Cretaceous. These intrusions are a direct result of crustal thickening due to the subduction. You can see in this picture, faulting also is occurring during the Tuhua and the Rangitata. Right here is this fault here. A lot of these are near vertical, and they cross-cut the igneous intrusions in the dikes. And they also have strikes similar to the synforms and antiforms found from some of the other deformational events. Excuse me. So, around 70 million years ago, Zealandia starts to rift away from Gondwana. An active rift basin opens up in through here, and Zealandia starts moving away. This is due to slab rollback of the Pacific plate due to asthenospheric wind, where mantle convection happening in the asthenosphere pushes back on the subducting slab, causing it to roll backwards. This rollback causes extension to happen, forming this rift, and helped pull New Zealand away from Gondwana. After this, New Zealand was cooling and subsiding, a lot of it going below sea level. One of the models that we found while looking for how Zealandia drifted away from Gondwana was the Brothers model, which they believe in the slab pull method. As you can see here in the figure, they have slab pull pulling Zealandia away, and then they move down, something changes in the slab pull and the subduction, and this little chunk breaks off, and then subduction begins to occur in the other direction, forming volcanism and faulting over here. But over here you see they have this rifting, and then it just stops and goes away. So it's not a bad model, but we don't believe it's the more correct model. It's not a very good explanation. We believe the real driving mechanism was that slab roll back up the Pacific plate. We just wanted to show what some of the other models and ideas were for this interesting occurrence of the rifting of Zealandia away from Gondwana. So we're almost there to present day New Zealand. We have the Pacific plate starting to subduct underneath New Zealand and the Australian plate over here. High angle reverse faults and proto-transform faults begin to form, but we need a second important event to occur so the Alpine fault and other similar strikes and faults can emerge as we know them today. This event is the Kaikoura orogeny. It's the third mountain building event after the Tahu and the Rangitata. This has the Pacific plate subducting underneath the Australia, as you can see in this figure here. We believe the rifting from the Tasman Sea created a possible explanation for the Alpine fault's transformed structure. The mechanism, though, for a subduction zone to a transform fault to another subduction zone is still under investigation. But we do know that the subduction of the Pacific plate and the oblique thrusting of the Alpine fault created the southern Alps as we see them today. You can see from here, like most subduction zones, as one plate goes down, the crust is getting squished together, and this uplifting the southern Alps, and then we can see here the Alpine fault. So we have a quick link. Go through really quick here. So we have a little bit of subduction as it's saying. We don't believe that all the times on this video are completely accurate, but we found this to be the best representation of what was happening in New Zealand that we could show. See, plate collision is happening in the Northland. We've got Pacific subducting underneath the Australian up here. You can see the beginnings of this transform fault starting to occur. We see some clockwise rotation happening to New Zealand, which is also helping this transform fault to move. More compression as these plates are starting to come together and converge. And then we have the uplift of the Alpine fault and the solidification of, the Southern Alps and the solidification of the Alpine fault going along through here. And then as the rotation continues, we have present day New Zealand. So here's some figure about talking about the Alpine fault. As you can see, some principal stress directions are coming mainly from the west and east directions, with our sigma 1 in red and our sigma 2 being in green, coming out the top. The Southern Alps have an average uplift of 10 millimeters per year, where growth is greatest on the southern end. The rate of strikes of movement outpaces the vertical slip, which is why we call it a transpressional fault with kind of an oblique compressional component. And here we have another figure showing a lot of the vertical slip. As you can see, the majority of the vertical slip is happening close to the fault. The farther away we get, the less vertical slip we are getting. To kind of finish this off, we have subduction to the south. This figure is a great representation I found of the different subduction zones happening along the plate boundary. To the north here, you can see that these are earthquakes, and the depths of the earthquakes increase, starting from shallow here at the orange, going all the way down into the deep blues and purples. So this is saying that subduction is happening from an east to west direction, with the Pacific plate subducting under the Australian this way. And then, all along through here, you can see that there are not very many of these deep earthquakes because this is the transform fault, the Alpine fault. And then subduction resumes over here to the south of the main island, because we can see by the colors of the earthquakes the depths are going in an opposite direction. We have the most shallow in the orange starting on the west and moving eastward, going deeper, which means that the subduction happening to the south of the island is from a westward subducting, the Australian subducting into the Pacific plate from west to east. And we believe that in order to form these opposing subduction zones, as the Pacific plate initiates subduction here to the north, it only started with one part while the other parts of the plates were just kind of sitting next to each other. And then as it began its clockwise rotation and started to have less strike-slip movement along the fault, the clockwise rotation made both of the plates converge. And as they were having this convergence, fractures and fracturing began to appear along both the plates. And we believe that the fractures that appeared on the Australian plate weakened it enough so that the Australian plate buckled and then began subduction underneath the Pacific plate in the south, and that's why we have two opposing subduction zones. To kind of support this, we've got this figure that shows the rotation and movement of the northern island. So New Zealand is rotating differentially north to south. North is a clockwise component to it, as you can see here in this figure, and the south is a counterclockwise component to its rotation. We believe both of these rotations are affected by the placement of the subduction zones to the north and south of New Zealand. This figure is mainly just to highlight that there definitely is a clockwise rotation in the north, but we cannot find a good figure for the clockwise rotation to the south. That's what less is known about it. This recent studies shows the interior of the Alpine Fault Zone. You can see the Alpine Fault right along through here, and then you see all the metamorphosed rock in between and a lot of conjugate faulting happening further away. The oblique transversal nature of the Alpine Fault creates these conjugate faults seen here. We believe a lot of this has to do with that opposing nature of the subduction zones. We've got Pacific going east-west in the north, Australian going west-east in the south. This is what allows for the slippage along the Alpine Fault, but it also makes it transgressional, so there's still convergence happening and vertical uplift happening, and so it's what creates all of these different types of faulting seen in these pictures. And then to explain why there isn't a subduction zone on New Zealand itself along the Alpine Fault, it is because the compositional nature of the crust at that point. You've got continental crusts of New Zealand right there, hitting each other, converging, but neither one is more dense than the other, and they're not going to subduct along each other because of their densities. So they just form a transform fault right along New Zealand itself, and then as soon as you get off the mainland, that's where subduction is taking place again, because the density is high enough of the oceanic plates that one can subduct underneath the other. These are our references. And do we have any questions?